The past perfect tense in English, also known as the pluperfect, is a verb tense for past actions that happened before something else in the past. The past perfect is recognized by the auxiliary verb to have, but it's another complicated tense that doesn't translate well in other languages. In this tense, the verb to have is accompanied by a main verb which takes the past participle form similar to the present perfect. But in the subject-verb agreement, only the auxiliary verb to have will be conjugated in the past perfect, and the conjugation is had for all subjects. The past participle of the main verb remains the same no matter what the subject is. So the pattern for the past perfect tense is a subject plus had plus a past participle. To make matters simple, I will be using the same verbs for the same pattern that I used in the previous video of the present perfect. This way, it's easier to follow. Let's use the verb to talk in the past perfect. To put the verb in the tense, we begin with the subject, provide had for all subjects, and then use the past participle of to talk. I had talked. You had talked. He, she, it had talked. We had talked, and they had talked. This is how the main verb functions in the past perfect, but no contractions can be made. Still, all changes are exactly the same, so it's not too hard to remember. Plus, it would be meaningless to cover all subjects because all conjugations are the same, so I will only emphasize the pronunciation. A different verb with an irregular past participle is to eat. The structure is a subject and then had eaten. Had eaten. Despite having an irregular participle, the main verb still works in the past perfect. A different verb is to make. The pattern is a subject and then had made. Had made. The participle of to make only changes one letter. A different verb is to speak. The pattern is a subject and then had spoken. Had spoken. This is the function of the past perfect tense, but to understand it, it's important to tell the difference between the past simple and past perfect. When talking about some point in the past and referring to an event that happened earlier, using the past perfect conveys the sequence of events more specifically. The past simple explains an action that happened at a specific time in the past and finished in the past. But the past perfect describes an action that already happened before another past action. Take a look at these sentences. She went to the store. She had gone to the store when he came. The first sentence means that she went to the store at some point in the past, but it's unknown when. The second sentence indicates that she had gone when he arrived, meaning that the action already happened before a different subject initiated a different action. Additionally, it's possible to rewrite it. When he came, she had gone to the store. Another example is, I ate dinner. I had eaten dinner before you arrived. Or, before you arrived, I had eaten dinner. The difference is when another action happens that would allow for the past perfect. The past simple represents a single past event, but the past perfect shows an action that happened before another action. In other words, the past perfect requires two actions in the past that occur in each other's duration, meaning that a past perfect action happened before a past simple action began. Alongside, it's very practical to understand the time expressions that the past perfect can utilize. Some words are before, by the time, already, until, when, as soon as, since, for, by, and more. These keywords are very practical to know because they show a sequence of events where one action happened before another, using a short or a long time. Either way, these words are very crucial to utilize, and I will be using them in this video. Another function of the past perfect is being used in a part of a sentence that explains the condition, also known as the if clause. This concept is an extremely vital grammar topic that needs a different explanation for a future video, but I will briefly mention it. Most often when writing, we use a verb in the past perfect that happened before other actions. Writing an entire paragraph with every verb in the past perfect is unnecessary because we establish times that allow us to describe an action in an earlier time. This idea brings us to the if clause, which describes a condition, meaning an action will happen if something specific happens. It sets up a hypothetical possibility expressing potential outcomes based on conditions. An example of that is, if I had woken up, I would have had time. In this phrase, we use the past perfect for the fragment and then continue with the conditional perfect, another future topic. Essentially, the past perfect has the function of being part of a sentence that describes a hypothetical condition. So the conditional perfect and if clauses will be extremely useful with the past perfect. Anyhow, it's important to understand when to not use the past perfect. We do not use it when conveying a specific event in the past, like I had eaten in the morning. This phrase doesn't work because meaningfully something must happen next, implying that the action occurred before something else. The something else doesn't always have to be mentioned, but the context needs to make it clear. In this case, there is no context, so the past perfect doesn't make sense. It would be better to say something like, I had eaten before I went to school. This way, the past perfect has two past actions that occur with each other. This is the role of the past perfect. To use the past perfect with negation, we add a negative word like not or never after the auxiliary verb had, but before the past participle. Subject plus had plus a negative plus a past participle. Some examples are, I had not eaten at that restaurant before I came to London. My friends had never gone to France before their trip to Italy. In this case, a negative contraction can be made. When asking a question in the past participle, the auxiliary verb to have comes first, followed by the subject and then the past participle. Had plus the subject plus a past participle. Had the bus left by the time you came? Had they met Peter before last night? The responses can be affirmative and negative, but when negative, they can also be contracted. Here are examples with time expressions. The movie had begun when we arrived. The lesson hadn't started until the teacher came. They had left the house as soon as they woke up. We had worked together before we became friends. She had written her book by the time she was 20 years old. Everyone had arrived at the party by 8 p.m. This is how the past perfect works, and with more practice, here are common regular and irregular verbs in the tense with negation. Finally, the past perfect can also be continuous, and when it is, it shows an ongoing action that started and continued in the past for some time before ending. It highlights an action that began in the past and is still ongoing in the past, emphasizing its continuation and focusing on the action itself to indicate how long the action had been happening in the past. The pattern of this tense uses had been with the present participle. A subject plus had plus been plus a present participle, which is an infinitive with ing. Some examples are, I had been working for 5 years when I got a promotion. We had been sitting for hours by the time we finished the food. You had been driving for 3 hours before the car broke down. Generally, the past perfect continuous is rare in English conversations, and I would advise knowing it but not using it a lot. Once you have a high level of English, then it would be practical, but it's useful to understand its purpose. Nonetheless, this is how the past perfect fully works in English.